Welcome back again to part 3 of the Seagull restoration, and I'm going to jump right into it. So continuing on from the last part of removing the remainder of the leatherette, I'm pulling off these side plates, and we'll speed this video up a little bit. There's 5 screws that hold this plate on. And there we go. And that reveals the mechanism and the cam for the focus. There's several parts in here, very simple design. And there's basically the plate that attaches to the front cover that moves the lenses. There's a guide plate, and then there's an adjustment plate on the top. And I think I'll just leave that adjustment plate on there. Remove the rubber bushing washer off the camshaft there. Now we'll remove the other side. I believe it's just 4 screws. All that adhesive will get removed later on. And there's actually only 3 screws because one of the screws passes through the roller, film guide roller. So this little part is the tensioner for the cam. And a couple screws, and then inside the head of this is a spring and a nylon bushing. And that nylon bushing rides against the cam. So now that's off, we'll move on to removing the front cover. Always interesting to see what's behind these covers, as I've never had this camera apart before. This retainer ring here, it's a collar for the shutter release. And it just threads on. I just use a pair of snap ring pliers to remove it. Now the self timer knob is caught here, and I'm starting to figure that out. There we go. And there's the front cover. Shutter speeds and aperture dials, and the shutter assembly itself. So basically I'm just trying to figure out how it all works, actuating the mechanism, seeing how it fits. The wire going to it is for the light sync, or flash sync rather. And the ring down there inside are the levers that connect the aperture and the shutter speed to the cam in the back. So I set the self timer, it's 10 seconds. I'll activate it, make sure it's working, and it is. Sounds good, it's smooth. And that's pretty close to 10 seconds. It's important to remember the placement of these parts, because if it's not exact and all these levers don't line up right, it's not going to work. A little bit of trial and error. The camera helps to remember what you did and how it came apart. And these parts are made out of some type of The inner part is steel and the outer part is almost like a Teflon, silver plated Teflon. And there was no grease in there whatsoever. By design, I assume. This little set screw took some time to find. I couldn't figure out how I couldn't pull off the element there, the housing for the element. And one thing I've learned is you never try to force anything, so you just keep searching until you find the culprit. And that was it. That's a set screw for the retaining ring, the barrel of the retaining ring. And now one thing I noticed about this is that they adjust the focus by the height of that lens. So I'm measuring it here so I can put it back in the exact same place. And it may need fine adjustment afterwards, after it's reassembled, but this will give me a starting place. So I'm measuring from the lower retainer ring on the barrel to the bottom of the retaining ring on the front element. And it looks like 10.83 millimeters. So I'm going to measure this in a couple different ways. I'll use the depth gauge, looks like 13.5, and it's a little easier and the angle's straight, so that might be a little bit better way to measure it. So now we'll remove the focus wheel again, and now we can see the other side of the mechanism. Remove the tensioner off the cam. This one had some pressure on it, and if I was smart I would have rotated the focus knob all the way the other way and extended it, but it came off, no big deal. You can see it just popped off there under tension. Luckily both of the nylon bushings were in good shape. And that will not come out of there without the or with the guide plate on, as I quickly discover. So now I'm just looking to see how it works exactly, how the cams line up, their orientation, and at which point you're at infinity and where the cams sit when you're in that position, and the same for the minimum focus distance. There's also some nylon inserts on that steel plate that allow for the action to be smooth. So this is the main cam shaft. This was really the only part of the entire camera that was all brass. A single screw in the center. And now I'll remove the guide plate. Just trying to find the perfect screwdriver there that fits the screw. These screws, the heads of them, the slot was incredibly thin. And that is the thinnest screwdriver I had. And it still was tight. And there's the guide plate. And there's the focus arm, I guess you would call that. Or the mounting plate. And I am going to leave those guide plate adjusters in the exact position they are, because if I put it together exactly the way it came out, then it should fit up first try. If it was sloppy and needed adjustment, then of course I would adjust it, but it seemed to be pretty tight. This side had a couple washers. I assume those are spacers because those screws are necked, maybe 2 millimeters, and they use those brass washers to allow the plate not to move vertically. And then it's out. So this is how the cams look. They are identical left and right, so I don't have to worry about orientation. Now I'm just tapping out the center shaft very gently. I don't want to damage the brass or the threads inside there. And that removed the first cam. Just a press fit. And on the back of that, another washer. And I assume that washer was put in there during assembly to pick up the tensioner, because it was probably just below it. So they just spaced it out. Thought I was going to get lucky here and that would just pop right off, but of course it didn't. It's pressed on as well. A little bit of slop in there, actually quite a bit of slop. I'm surprised. So we'll just tap that out. It came right off very easily. And that's it for the shaft. It's finally out. There's really not much left on the camera before you get to that part. And it looks in great shape. A lot of old grease, but once it cleans up, it looks great. Trying to stay organized. Now I'm removing the film guide rollers, one on the top, one on the bottom, 2 screws each. They were in good shape, they weren't bent, and they were stainless steel. There's the one on the bottom, and that chrome plated piece, spring steel, is just the roll tensioner. Keeps the roll from unraveling, puts a little tension on it so it doesn't rotate in there. Now back to the faceplate. Lots of glue left on that. Lots of nicks and scratches around the ring, outer ring. So we'll speed this up here a little bit. I just go around with a small razor blade, clean up the big stuff. I noticed some of the paint was peeling as well, so I removed as much of that as possible, because this entire piece is going to get repainted anyways, and doesn't really matter how pretty that is where the leatherette goes, just as long as it's clean. So I'm going to use 600 grit sandpaper. This is wet dry sandpaper, and remove all the little nicks, scratches off the ring there. It's really soft aluminum, so it really doesn't take a lot of effort. I'm trying not to hit the area around where the lenses sit, because I had hopes of just painting that outer ring and not painting the sides of that. And as it turned out, I didn't make any marks on it, and it looked really good. I did not want to have to re-stencil all the aperture numbers and shutter speed numbers and everything, so that'll pretty much do it for this episode, part 3, and I'll catch you again in part 4. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.